Yes, it's time now to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio a lecturer of University of Lagos, Dr. Dani Kere, and in-house analyst, Obani Akinwale. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on BBC Breakfast.
Good morning. Good morning,
all right, we head straight to the papers now, and I begin with the blueprint. It's au revoir, Atiku, as Supreme Court okays Buhari's re-election. APC hails verdict, warns PDP on destructive agenda. Final judgment comes from God, PDP. Judiciary's been sabotaged, undermined, Atiku. Verdict, death knell for money politics, PSC. Let's move on without further distraction, Buhari tells ex-vice president and PDP. I will move on to the front page of the News Direct. Supreme Court mixed reactions trail dismissal of Atiku's appeal against Buhari's election victory. Sanwo-Olu congratulates Buhari on Supreme Court victory. Join APC to move Nigeria forward, Tinubu tells Atiku. Nigeria lacks strong judiciary, impartial electoral umpire, Atiku. Peter Obi, Atiku's lawyers react. On the front page of the Daily Trust, Supreme Court verdict, Cabal sabotage judiciary, Atiku, Nigeria must move on, Buhari. And to the front page of the Daily Times now, presidential poll, Supreme Court affirms Buhari's election, Apex Court dismisses Atiku, PDP's appeal against president to give reasons for its decision at a later date. Mixed reactions trail judgment. All right, gentlemen, all the newspapers we have at this time is looking at the Supreme Court's judgment yesterday affirming the re-election of President Buhari. But PDP says it's surprised by this judgment and the turn of events. I wonder how it comes to you, gentlemen, because I can see that you're smiling. It didn't come to you as a surprise, Dr. Kerry?
Not at all.
It didn't come to you as a surprise?
Obviously not.
Really?
Yes.
I wonder why it is a surprise to the PDP then.
I don't even think it's a surprise to them. I don't think so. You know, the point is that when you look at, you know, even the initial judgment by the tribunal and the rest of it, you can easily suspect that there wasn't going to be anything different at the Supreme Court. You know, but again, you know, it's part of the judicial system we practice. You know, a case has been, you know, finalized, decision taken, but the reason behind that decision will come later.
Absolutely.
Are you getting it? And you know, but that's the system. Otherwise, I expected that the reasons should have been advanced
made clear
before, so that it is on the basis of those reasons that you should actually take a position. But that's the usual tradition of the court. So, you know, a judgment could be made, then reasons behind it will come later. Now, what I have seen clearly
but was the
from
PDP
this,
able to prove beyond reasonable doubt? Because that's always the question.
that
that's
can only
the
be
issue.
that can only be determined by the jury. You know, it's not something we can argue here whether they were able to. The case was dismissed, that they were not able to prove any of those positions. So we take it that that is the way it is. You know, for us to begin to advance, you know, arguments as to whether they were able to prove or not, and as a judge who did it, you just be, you know, wasting your time unnecessarily. The point remains that as it stands today, the election that has been contested is perfectly over. The Supreme Court has ruled, and that is final. There's no other court except, like they said, maybe God is going to be the.
That
but
final
for now,
judgment comes from God.
But again, there are a lot of lessons to learn, which is that we do not need to take laws into our hands. Whenever there is an issue, particularly political issues like this, let the courts, you know, do their job. Don't take laws into your hands. And I want to respect PDP for that, because I noticed that, you know, in the past, decisions of this kind, that the elections results are declared, and before you know, the next thing is violence as a result of certain inciting, or, you know, utterances that might come from the contestants and the rest. But this time around, at least the courts were allowed to do their job. And today, as it stands, the position is clear, which is that Buhari remains the president, affirmed by the Supreme Court, and there's no other thing anybody can do about that.
Absolutely. Let's get Obani's perspective to this now. You also said you were not surprised. I wonder why, but then like he said, the courts were allowed to do their job, but the PDP is saying that some cabal, the judiciary system, is being sabotaged.
Okay, let's start from the Presidential Election Tribunal's testimonies. One of the strong arguments that PDP relied upon was the availability of INEC server. And the factsdon'tlie.com, which supposedly is the server of INEC, was registered about a month after the national election. You recall vividly that in person of Mr. Showumi was saying that he had Barrister Mikey Guinea saying that INEC would transmit election through the electronically when the Electoral Act states that electronic voting is not allowed in the country. Again, I was speaking with one of our guys yesterday, and he was telling me that in law school, you separately study what they call appeal. And what appeal means is that the judgment has been passed, and you are now telling them why that judgment does not stand.
Yes.
So there is no opening of fresh cases.
Yes.
Now, the CGN in his wisdom yesterday said the 7 jurists have sat down and go through that report for 2 weeks, and they saw that the report was lacking in merit. Now, why they've started delaying releasing their conditions for some of this stuff is that, if you remember 2015, 2011, before the Supreme Court or any other court passes judgment, there is judgment leakage. So they discovered that the Secretariat sometimes gives this information out. So what they do in recent time is that it's either they all write their judgment with their handwriting, and the day of the judgment, if it's going to be around 10, they will not give it to those secretaries to start typing. And sometimes if you look at the way even they read, you see some blunders when they were even reading those judgments. So again, it's a part of the system we're running. Am I surprised? I am not. Simply because the case from day one was bent on, again, how do you justify bringing an agriculturist from Kenya to come and do forensic analysis in Nigeria?
All right.
So absolutely there is nothing, no case. It's just that, you know, one of the problems I said we have in this country is the lawyers. They know the facts. They know the facts in law, because you can't put sentiments at the court. You have the fact. Was there any server? No server. Was there any place that can justify it? No. Can an agriculturist be a forensic analyst? No. So these are some of the premises that they went there. And again, I think it's an undoing on the part of PDP to use Ugo Chinyere of CUP to start peddling rumor that Supreme Court judges are about doing this and that. So I would just advise, like Bola Ahmed Tinubu advised Atiku yesterday, that you should quickly come and join APC.
Will that happen?
So
he doesn't need to join APC. You know,
because he has said he's going to be, he will still fight for a democracy,
yes,
even though that his spirit is not broken.
And that does not even amount to joining APC.
Absolutely.
He could still fight for democracy, you know, do everything to promote democracy without necessarily. Must we all join APC? I don't think that's reasonable.
It's not. Yeah.
Yes, but join forces with APC, you know, to move this nation forward, the country forward, is a different thing from come and join the APC as a member. Though Atiku is practically a member of, you know, those parties. But again, there's something I want us to get. Truly, at the point of training of returning collation officers and the rest, you know, ask anybody who went through those trainings. There was that affirmation by INEC officials that they were going to transmit results electronically. While the manual is going on, the electronic transmission will equally be going on. That there will be somebody at that point of collation that when you are doing your manual calculation, your recording and the rest, the other man will be using the gadget to transmit, which means that from day one, INEC has been a fraud. That's the meaning, because that was the impression we were given.
Very weighty allegations.
Yes. I was part of the training, so I'm not just saying it from outside.
All right, all right. We have to leave it at this point, gentlemen. Thank you for your contribution on the newspaper review this morning.
Now it's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio a lecturer at the University of Lagos, Dr. Dan Ikere, and in-house analyst, Obani Akinwale. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Morning.
Thank you.
All right, we'll look at the newspapers this morning. We have the Vanguard newspaper where it says here, presidential poll, tussle ends, Supreme Court dismisses Atiku's petition. Verdict part of our democratic challenges, as Atiku vows to keep fighting for Nigeria. Discard all disruptive agenda, APC urges PDP Atiku. Buhari Lords Atiku, PDP says, more matter now closed. That's in the Vanguard newspaper this morning. The Nation newspaper says here, Atiku, end of the road. The rider says PDP candidates appeal lacks merit, says Supreme Court. Atiku says, I'll keep fighting rather. Buhari says it's time to move on. The blueprint is saying yes, au revoir, Atiku, as Supreme Court okays Buhari's re-election. The riders here says APC Hill verdict wants PDP on destructive agenda. Final judgment comes from God, says PDP. Judiciary is being sabotaged, undermined, says Atiku. Verdict, death, kneel for money politics, says PSC. Let's move on without further distractions, Buhari tells ex-VP PDP. News Direct here is the same story. Supreme Court mixed reactions trail dismissal of Atiku's appeal against Buhari's election victory. Sanwo-Olu congratulates Buhari on Supreme Court victory. Join APC to move Nigeria forward, Tinubu tells Atiku. Nigeria lacks strong judiciary, impartial electoral umpire, says Atiku. Peter Obi, Atiku's lawyers, react. The Daily Trust, Supreme Court verdict, Cabal, sabotage judiciary, Atiku, Nigeria must move on, says Buhari. Supreme Court, as well as in the Daily Times, a presidential poll, Supreme Court affirms Buhari's re-election. Appeal Court dismisses Atiku's PDP appeal against President Buhari to give reasons for his decision at a later date. Mixed reaction trails judgment. Well, that's newspapers we have this morning. Of course, the headlines are agog here. All the papers are the same headlines. Supreme Court affirms Buhari's re-election. And that's what we're going to be discussing this morning. Gentlemen, looking at this, it's been a long process. From the tribunal to the appeal court and now the Supreme Court, and victory given to the APC. What's your reaction?
We should also look, there are two sides of the story. First, the judgment was not a surprise, but the way the judgment takes is a surprise. If you look at the antecedents, you find out that most time what you find out is that the appellants and the cross-appellants will go and argue their cases at the Supreme Court, make their final submissions, and Supreme Courts normally communicate to them that the day of judgment will be communicated to them. But in this case, the Lord GSCs in their own wisdom decided to pass the judgment because they said they have gone through the records for over 2 weeks. Again, we look at what will be the financial burden on the system. Recall vividly during the Yaradua Buhari Supreme Court saga, the voting was about 4-3. Actually, it was even 3-3. Then the presiding CJN had to vote in favor of President Umaru Yar'Adua, late President Umaru Yar'Adua. And just about a couple of days ago, INEC were telling us that for them to match Kogi election with the governorship election, they're actually saving 290 million. So you could imagine how much more we'll have had to have if perhaps they said the election was with irregularities and we need to go back to square and then uncertainty in the system. But nonetheless, the problem against that law, he that alleges must be the one to prove. So, and again, certain things you cannot prove against the Constitution. And the Constitution says clearly that anything that is contrary to the Constitution will reign supreme. And what am I trying to drive at is that Constitution made provision that there is no electronic voting system in Nigeria. So if perhaps by INEC guideline, there is something we call electronic transmission of voters based on their smart card, it is contrary to the provision of the Nigerian law. So as such, the Nigerian law will take precedence. So that is what has played out. And again, that's why we need to sit down and look at our Constitution, because sometimes our Constitution are always made for the moment. They are not classical documents that you can always make reference to, and they can outlive the time. But in fairness, His Excellency Vice President Atiku Abubakar has no case.
He has no case.
He has no case.
Dr. Dan, looking at this case now, the APS court says it will give reasons for his decision at a later date. So that's come as a surprise to you?
No, but that has been the practice for quite a while now. You see, judgments being delivered and reasons being advanced later. So for me, that's not a surprise. But what I'm worried about is, a few things around the electoral issues, because for as long as the law does not capture electronic voting, I think that we must factor in the law in everything we do. It means that when INEC begins to give, directives, they must consider that background. Because there were a lot of people who could not vote in the last election because of accreditation.
So if the law does not recognize electronic voting, why are we using it?
Exactly what I'm talking
not voting
about.
electronically.
No. You see, the process of voting, some persons were denied the opportunity of voting because of what do you call it? Smart cards. Yeah, not reading their whatever.
Fingerprint.
All right. Meanwhile, it looks like we have two countries in Nigeria. Some part of the country, they didn't even worry about the card reader at all. But in some, they say it must be the card reader. If you are not screened through the card reader, you will not vote. So when we already recognize this, why give Nigeria all those hitches? So I'm thinking that the electoral body did not do well in that regard. And like I said, even at the training for coalition or whatever, they were, talking about this as if there was any move to change, the constitution about electronic voting. But on the issue of the court case, the Supreme Court has given a verdict. There's practically nothing any Nigerian can do as far as that issue is concerned, except you want to take laws into your hands, which is not, the best. And in any case, should you even go into that, then there are a lot of things associated with that. You might end up in jail eventually, depending on whatever. But I think that we should give peace a chance. You have tried all you needed to do, but that is Atiku PDP. You've tried the law. The law has made it clear that even in contesting any position, you do not need to bring certificates. That was the first position by the tribunal. You only need to fill a form and show that, yes, you don't need the, what do you call it?
It's not the
copies
requisite.
No, it's not. Just say I have school cert. That's all. Nobody should ask you for a copy of it.
Okay.
Yes, just fill it there. That's all that is needed. So a lot of things have been revealed as a result of this. So it is part of the benefits of trying every process whenever it comes like this. So Nigerians have gained to a large extent. People have been well informed that should I anywhere give you any hurdle of smart card reader and the rest, just throw away those things and vote. That's the meaning.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for talking to us on this issue that has dominated the news since yesterday until today.
It's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio a lecturer from the University of Lagos, Dr. Dani Kere, and in-house analyst, Obani Yakinwale. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on TVC Breakfast. All right, we begin the newspaper review from the Vanguard. Presidential poll. Tussle ends as Supreme Court dismisses Atiku's petition. Verdict, part of our democratic challenges. Atiku vows to keep fighting for Nigeria. Discard all destructive, disruptive agenda, APC urges PDP. Atiku. Buhari lauds Atiku. PDP says matter now closed. To the Nation newspaper now, Atiku, end of the road. PDP candidates' appeal lacks merit, says Supreme Court. Atiku, I'll keep fighting. Buhari, it's time to move on. To the blueprint now, it's au revoir Atiku as Supreme Court okays Buhari's re-election. APC hails verdict, warns PDP on destructive agenda. Final judgment comes from God. PDP, judiciary's been sabotaged, undermined. Atiku, verdict, death knell for money politics. BSC, let's move on without further distractions, Buhari tells ex-Vice President, PDP. On the front page of the News Direct, Supreme Court mixed reactions to trail dismissal of Atiku's appeal against Buhari's election victory. Sanwo-Olu congratulates Buhari on Supreme Court victory. Join APC to move Nigeria forward, Tinubu tells Atiku. Nigeria lacks strong judiciary, impartial electoral umpire, Atiku. B2B, Atiku's lawyers react. On the front page of the Daily Trust now, Supreme Court's verdicts, Cabal sabotaged judiciary, Atiku, Nigeria must move on, Buhari. And finally, on the front page of the Daily Times, presidential poll, Supreme Court affirms Buhari's election. Apex Court dismisses Atiku PDP's appeal against president to give reasons for its decision at a later date. Mixed reaction, trail judgment. Gentlemen, this story is on the front page of all the newspapers this morning, talking about the Supreme Court's judgment, reaffirming the election of the president. But then, let's look at what it means for our democracy. All of these processes, it's meant to entrench democratic processes in our country. And this year we celebrated 20 years. Have we moved forward looking at all of this, the back and forth that we have had when you look at this judgment? I'll start with you, Dr. Ekere.
All right, thank you. Somehow, whether you believe it or not, we are moving. At least experience is growing. Yeah, we are beginning to see different dimensions of how democracy plays, out in the system. Now, we must be very, very careful when you have issues of this kind, because we easily run to the courts. A number of times, when you have a challenge and you present it before those who practice law, the first thing they will tell you is that a lot of them will tell you you have a case. But sometimes I wonder whether it is just business or so, because you'll be imagining that the rules are clear, and you have this retinue of senior advocates advising PDP, this is this. But when the courts, both the tribunal and the Supreme Court eventually gave their judgments, you could see the various analyses that they made with respect to how this case cannot stand. And you'll be wondering. Now, the next thing is when you finish from watching, they will tell you, let's go to the appeal. So we must equally be very careful. Now,
be careful, because the judiciary is said to be the last hope of the common man. And so in a democracy, you can explore that.
Yes, no, that's what I'm saying. What has played out is a lesson. But I'm saying that sometimes too, it seems as if either because when you look at the practice of law generally, here, the system we are practicing is a type that the knowledge of the law per se is not really a function of how many books you have read, how many degrees you've gathered. It's more of a function of the office you occupy. Yes, that is what the knowledge of the law truly is. It's something of, it is something on authority. And that's why the judge is the one who has the superior knowledge of the law, and not whether you are a professor of law or so. Because they will only go there and speculate, and at the time the judge makes a ruling, as your lordship is. But in deepening democracy, we must look at it that yes, democracy cannot actually function without the rule of law.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, but for us to deepen democracy, it goes beyond law. What is the disposition of the Nigerian towards democracy? Do we have that orientation itself? And that is why a lot of this is drags, here and there. We do all manner of, but even at the family level, do you give room for that deliberation at all? Do you allow that?
Of course,
we have this orientation of dictatorship.
We like imposing. Peace to reign in the home, you have to give room for that.
But we like imposing views, and that is one of the things that is playing out even at the outer space when we talk about democratic practice.
All right, so let's bring Obani Akinwale into this now. When you talk about democracy, there has to be a vibrant opposition, and like it is being said now from the various reactions, it is time to move forward. How should the opposition move forward from here now?
So the first thing I would say is that there is no opposition in Nigeria as we speak.
Oh,
really? Because if you look at the two political parties we have, you have NPDP in APC, you have Reform APC in PDP. So what you find out is that PDP is a clone of APC, APC is a clone of PDP. Who are the pioneer members of APC? The likes of Chief Tommy Kimi, who formed the party manifesto and constitution, is now a chieftain of PDP. You look at Atiku Abubakar, who was MPDP, that joined. Look at Amechi. So practically, what we have is, the only time we can begin to get it right is when we begin to strengthen institutions. You find out that who are the people, who are the people that are putting the justices, the judges, or whatever on the bench. And in this climb, people are put sometimes on particular position, not based on merit, but based on people they know. And unfortunately for us, instead of us trying to do what is right, we want to make sure that we pay back to those that put us to where we belong. So for perhaps the current CJN, you remember that the man was just in his house when Buhari called him that, "I'll fire Onoge. Come and take over this." And the man is there. And who nominates who becomes the member of the Justice of Supreme Court is the president. Who determines, remember the case that happens in Kebbi, that if the CJ of the state, she was not allowed into the chambers, she was removed. You remember what happened in Kogi recently?
Absolutely.
That the House of the panel report did not indict the deputy governor, the CJ that was having running battle with the governor was the one laughing and swearing in Edward Onoja as deputy governor of Kogi State. So the problem we've always had is that we don't have institutions. What we have is that we run personalities. So for us to have a viral opposition is when we begin to put our political system in perspective. Because what you find out is that it's just bandwagon. Today is APC. You remember a couple of weeks ago they said Jega has moved to PRP, and that is likely where the northern people are moving to. So what you find out is that you are going to have amalgamation of APC and PDP joining PRP.
Perhaps this is our own way of domesticating our own kind of democracy.
We cannot domesticate because democracy is not African. African is a monarch system or oligarchy system. So democracy has never worked anywhere in Africa. And I keep telling people, they said, what about Rwanda? Do we want a kind of president of Rwanda in Nigeria? Are we ready for that? So these are certain things that parameters that don't work.
We are gradually going there.
We are going there.
We are.
So if you have a situation whereby you said government of the people, by the people, and whatever for the people, you look at Saraki idea of electronic voting, Buhari must sign before election time. You look at Buhari said, I'm not signing, see INEC, see Sava. So upon all, the moment the government and again, it boils down to Dr. Dan's constituency. What kind of political graduate analysts or researchers are we turning out of our university environment so that they can enhance the system? But unfortunately, people are after the Nairas, the USD, and the exchange rate rather than impacting and creating a working institution and system in the country.
They don't equally forget that the people we breed, they came from a cultural orientation as well. So they are not from the space.
The intricacies, when you talk about that, it's quite complex.
But I believe with time we'll
get it right.
All
right, Dr. Danekere, thank you for your time. Obani Akinwale, thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.